So I'm going to try to explain where I think the hippie movement came from, because they were very influential on our culture, not just in the 60s, but also in the 70s and 80s and up to the present day, as well as the whole counterculture movement that was sort of aligned with them, but also had various strands to it. I think you could go back and look at influences from Eastern and Western spiritual or transcendental philosophy. For Western philosophy, you could look at the works of Henry David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson in the USA, who taught us to find our true selves, be one with nature, very very in line with hippie ideology. And in the East, look at Zen Buddhism and Hinduism. Zen Buddhism teaches us that that the ultimate state is a state of nirvana, where we are content and satisfied, and it's basically the ideology of peace, like being blissful and peaceful. And Hinduism teaches reincarnation, which is kind of naturalist, spiritualist philosophy. So that would be an influence. As for other Western sources, there is the work of existentialists. I don't know if you'd include Heidegger in there, but certainly Heidegger, with his philosophy of being in the world and Dasein's thrownness, that is a very kind of proto-hippie idea, because it's unlike the previous Enlightenment notion of the individual who is disconnected from the world, who is a rational agent making choices and exerting will over nature. Very different in his philosophy. And his student Herbert Marcuse, who focused on the power of eros to change and build civilizations, was another person who was very influential in the hippie movement. And just going back to another existentialist, Fyodor Dostoevsky is quoted as saying, "If God is dead, then everything is permitted." And this is kind of an attitude that was at home in the hippie movement. And it goes well with Marcuse's anti-authoritarian stance, in that there's no authority over us telling us that we can't do anything, so why not do stuff? And the hippies tried and experimented with drugs, sex, just went against all of the kind of cultural norms, and that's why they get the name counterculture. So, but there's also the influence of Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolent resistance, of love, love everyone. Same thing with Martin Luther King. He actually was very involved with the civil rights movement and directly put this philosophy into practice, while some hippies were just kind of using it as an excuse to do whatever they want, or not do anything. But I think that kind of exhausts most of the influences on the hippies. I think there was another influence, the Der Wandervogel movement from Germany, which is like countering the prevailing modernist culture, or modern culture of the day, which was industrial and kind of living in cities, and they wanted to get back to nature. So these people immigrated over to the USA and spread their philosophy around there, and that could have been another influence. But overall, I think that the main reason why the hippie movement was so powerful in American culture was that there's immense changes that were happening in the 60s. Not just cultural changes, but changes that were happening in the economy as well. Previously, the industrial mode of production was very focused on factory work, very focused on secondary, the secondary sector of the economy, and that was changing in the 70s. The most dominant sector of the economy would become the secondary sector. Service work, knowledge work, everything you associate with a post-industrial economy, a post-Fordist mode of production, flexible accumulation. All of this was very different from the Fordist era and the industrial mode of production. So something had to change. People had to adjust to this new environment, and culture had to be the way in which it did that. So culture taught people to break down the barriers between each other. You think of a rigid mode of production in a Fordist factory where the workers do a small piece of the work and they barely have any contact with those around them. Well, now the hippie movement is teaching everybody to kind of intermingle with one another, and this was also necessary for multiculturalism that would come in the 70s. And actually, I would say multiculturalism was necessary because of the way production had changed to more multinational corporations rather than just national corporations. But anyway, so the hippies, in encouraging people to try drugs and to break down the old norms and have sex and stuff, and all of this, they were facilitating a cultural shift which would adjust to the changes that were happening in the economy. So that's where the hippies ultimately come from. It's not ideologies coming together. Like, ideologies did come together, but it wasn't because they came together that the hippie movement happened. They came together for material reasons, I'm going to say, in which it was necessary for people to learn certain skills and to change the way their consciousness worked, to not be so, oppressed or repressed, and to capitalize on their creativity, to use their minds to the greatest extent possible, to come up with all kinds of imaginative ideas. That simply wouldn't be possible in a society where people were working in narrow, specialized tasks where they had to focus on rules imposed from above by people who knew best, and in which they didn't get much say in the process. And so that's where the hippies come from.